Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Thursday. It's April the 17th. Thanks for joining me here. Appreciate it. We're going to be rolling live right now on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. We're rolling over on X, Twitter, formerly Twitter, right? And we're also over on YouTube. YouTube people are really killing it, by the way. If you're over on YouTube, we really appreciate you. First of all, we never had an audience on YouTube, not ever. And now we're getting you over there. It's youtube.com/@Kyle Seraphin. Catching views, catching a little bit of growth there. We crossed 9,000 followers, which is not nothing. 9,000 subscribers, they call them up there. Everybody has a different term for that. It drives me nuts. Lastly, if you're watching on Spotify, this is going to be a fun show for you because if you're listening to the audio, you can actually watch the video at a couple times. You can do that at KyleSeraphinShow.com. We appreciate if you guys will like it. I like the comments. I'm trying to go out there and read all of your comments now. That's my new sort of commitment to you as you guys send them. And some people have been following us over on Apple and giving us some pretty nice feedback. One person said, somehow Kyle Seraphin seems to know everything about everything. Miss this guy. He's under 40 and he's done all these things. First of all, I shared it with the guys because it made me laugh. Actually, when you guys leave negative reviews, it does make me laugh. And he still gave me 2 out of 5 stars. Whoever this was said that I've done too many things. Then I realized, yeah, I've done too many things. We're going to talk about some of the things that I've done, specifically MS13 in Hyattsville, Maryland, which is relevant to today's sort of massive storyline as it continues. It's like the Donald Trump admin, and I don't think it's all of Trump's administration. I actually think that it's Stephen Miller, only based on the things that he's been saying. The policy that has been screwing around with this MS13 idiot. This guy that was in Maryland that got deported and he's now in El Salvador. That entire story, I never am a 4D chess believer, except when it comes to the Alien Enemies Act usage and deporting this guy. I'm having so much fun reading as DOJ slowly like blah, 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 pops out these details for people. And it looks like they just allowed a senator to hang himself with stupidity. So we're going to have fun with that. I'm going to show you some maps. I'm going to show you some real world locations and why the story has always rung true for me that this guy was probably an MS-13 individual, why he was associated with that gang, having worked with K-squads, having done surveillance on these guys, and done it in the place where this guy came from. So that's all kind of fun for me. I think it's going to be a little bit of fun for you guys as well to kind of just see, like I say, I like being able to present maps and say, hey, this is the location, this is where I was, this is what we know. That stuff's going to be fun for us. So we'll get into that in just a second. Before we get started with the program, we're going to get started with our first sponsor. And our sponsor today that leads us off is a company called Undertac, which is not necessarily a tactical company. It's a place to store your junk. And by your junk, I mean your man junk. That's right. Undertac, the world's best boxer briefs designed by Special Forces operators, Green Berets working in Africa's harshest conditions. My last partner in the FBI was a Green Beret who worked in Africa quite a bit. Undertac is not just underwear. It is tactical gear built for tough missions, for worldwide rucking, crushing your daily grind, anything in between. They're made from premium modal fabrics. They've got 50% better moisture wicking than cotton. If you've ever tried to wear cotton when you're doing something difficult in a sweaty environment, it is a death sentence for your thighs, turns you into hamburger meat. These can keep you cool and dry and locked in. It's got a hidden E&E pocket. That's escape and evasion. You can discreetly store critical items like a micro SD card with all of your crypto data, emergency cash, a small little key to be able to get out of handcuffs, or weed if you're one of those people. Yes, I know those people too. I knew all kinds of people growing up. It could be other things too, even more nefarious than that. Your last ditch piece of ammo. A pair of these things, you can add them with the merino wool socks that they make. They've got the Urban Ops hoodie. They've got all kinds of other items that you can wear. They're built tough and they're meant to keep you comfy and mission ready, whether you're at the range, whether you're in the field, or whether you're just hanging out on the couch, or maybe you're just out there mowing the lawn. You want to be ready. Get a limited time offer right now with Undertac.com. The promo code KYLE will get you a buy 3, get 1 free on their Undertac underwear. The one I like the most are called the Infantry. They're their everyday wear and very, very comfortable, super soft. it changed my mind about it. And I've been wearing the same kind of underwear for like 16 years. So not the same pair, obviously, although I might have some of those too. Your purchase is also going to support veteran-run charities that are fighting human trafficking. That is a topic that we will be getting into today. Check it out. Again, promo code Kyle over at undertac.com. Buy 3, get 1 free. Basically set your whole week up, and you won't have to do laundry for a couple days, which is a big deal to those of us who don't like to do laundry because we're regular dudes. All right, let's dive into today. So I want to start on a lighthearted note, if that's possible. And I was trying to figure out how this all works together. And I guess it starts with this. This is one of the stories that I saw over on CBS. CBS has this woman named Gayle King as one of their TV, what do we call them? She's a presenter. That's the UK's word for it, but I like it. There's a funding freeze fight over Harvard. We covered that yesterday. A great clip of that from The Daily Show and all these people that are totally humble bragging about how they went to Harvard. And right now, because you've got to get the normies involved in the fight. You've got to help the normie lefties understand that even though they didn't go to Harvard, they're very also upset about funding getting cut. So how do you do that? You go out there and you talk about research getting slashed and science is going to be defunded. This woman who just came back from space, she would like you to believe she's an astronaut. We might call her a space cadet. That was a thing from my childhood. Beyond the Ivy League, RFK Jr.'s NIH has slashed science funding across states that back Trump. Here's the deal. We have to drive that wedge, okay? Think. We got to put the chisel in between Trump supporters and states where he was favored. We got to show him that he's going after all the good stuff. So this article, which comes from their Health Watch, is talking about slashing NIH funding. Now, RFK Jr. and Donald Trump, 2 of the highest polling politicians in America when it comes to like favorability ratings in general. People like what these guys were about. There's a reason why he was elected the way that he was. The National Institutes of Health are cutting sweeping grants that fund scientific research, and they are inflicting pain almost universally, including you who like Donald Trump, in states that backed Donald Trump in the 2024 election. 40% of the organizations whose grants in the NIH were cut in the first month were in states that Donald Trump won. So you should be upset with Donald Trump, and by proxy, RFK Jr., you should be upset with them for taking away money. Yes, they've singled out the Ivy League colleges like Columbia and Harvard and others, but they've also gone after regular places like Florida and Georgia and Ohio and Nebraska and Texas. I looked on the list. The problem is that they are cutting down grants. Now, here's the funny thing about the way this article is written, and I found it quite interesting. Number one, the NIH funds tons of research that might be beneficial to Americans and American citizens, but a lot of that research is completely unregulated, and it runs off the cliff and goes over to Europe and goes over into Asia, and specifically, it goes into the Chinese hands. One of the things I found out working counterintelligence against the Chinese threat when I was living in D.C., or outside of D.C., was that they were not at all regulated. There are no strings on these monies. It's like, yeah, you can do the research, you can publish them. The federal government has no access to them after the fact. They're a grant with very minimal strings. We're a free information society. We are a group of people that is totally willing to tolerate spending our cash and everybody in the world benefiting from it. And it comes from the scientific community. It comes from the academic community in America, where they actually believe that information should be shared with everyone. That turns out not to be the case for a lot of other countries. They are more than happy to keep their research and their information under wraps. But if it's the United States, because we believe in this free sort of open, fair society that knowledge is meant for humanity, we end up getting screwed on this stuff. And the thing that they do it through is this process called tech transfer. Tech transfer is very specifically where a technology is developed in the United States, and the Chinese government, almost always, but other governments can do it too, but China's a big offender. They recognize the technology and the value that research provides. Then they fund that individual. And there's no law against this, by the way, folks. You paid for a technology or a research to be done. They pay a person to come over to China and set up a lab that is identical, but obviously they've already done the research. They can just recreate it very quickly, and therefore the Chinese will have it. And the money that they pay is exorbitant, and it almost always just goes back into the individual. So American taxpayers fund a technology. The Chinese government essentially pays the developer of it, who did it on U.S. taxpayer dime, in a cash grant for their research, and they can use it for research or paying people or paying themselves. And in the meantime, they get like an apartment somewhere in China. The Trump administration canceled hundreds of grants supporting research topics like vaccination, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and health of the LGBTQ plus populations. I want you to be completely outraged. The University of Texas lost their grant for this sort of thing. Are you mad that now DEI is not being funded? Isn't that kind of what we voted for? It's like saying that they're mad about the people getting deported. It's pretty funny. And again, I'm going to put her on the screen because here is that space cadet, Gayle King. She's a very serious person, and she wants you to take what she did very seriously. I want to touch on the Blue Origin story one more. There's another kind of thing running around right now. Social media is covering it. I'm actually seeing the New York Post covered in print. So it is a story on whether or not they even went to space, whether that constituted a trip to space. I'm seeing the same videos you guys are. If you're watching social media, people are showing how the capsule doesn't seem to be sealed. I can't tell if that's altered video, if that's old video, if that's a training video or something else. It's not obvious to me. So I'm not going to jump on the conclusion that they didn't actually blast a rocket into space. But, you know, Gayle King wants you to take her real seriously because she's basically like every other great American pioneer on the forefront of going into space when it was unsafe and dangerous and people lost their lives. She's basically like Alan Shepard, and she's going to tell you that. So take her seriously, please. And also, you should be very mad at Donald Trump because he slashed LGBTQ plus health population research, apparently.
This is what bothers me, because I've certainly read some of the things online coming from people that I know, that I like, that I consider friends. And this is what I would say to that. Space is not an either or, it's a both and. And because you do something in space doesn't mean you're taking anything away from Earth. And what you're doing in space is trying to make things better here on Earth. What Blue Origin wants to do is take the waste here and figure out a way to put it in space to make our planet cleaner. I mean, Jeff Bezos has so many ideas, and the people that are working there are really devoted and dedicated to making our planet a better place. That's number one. Number two, have you been? Have you been? If you've been and you still feel that way after you come back, please let's have a conversation. Number three, please don't call it a ride. That is not a friggin' ride. Whenever a man goes up, you have never said to an astronaut, boy, what a ride. You know, we duplicated the same trajectory that Alan Shepard did back in the day, pretty much. No one called that a ride. It was called a flight. It was called a journey, because a ride implies that it's something frivolous or something that's lighthearted. There was nothing frivolous about what we did and the machine that we were on and what it took for the people to get that machine up and running, to get us up and get us back down safely. So, you know, I'm very disappointed and very saddened by it. And I also say this, what it's doing to inspire other women and young girls, please don't ignore that. I've had so many women and young girls reach out to me, and men too, by the way, men too.
Yeah, men and women, they're reaching out to Gayle King and they're saying, you are so inspiring. You and your buddy Katy Perry, you are making this country have hope that regular people who can spend between $150,000 and $30 million will be able to also spend an 11-minute ride, a very expensive carnival. We've been having some pretty serious shows here for a little while. I want to show you why people are so inspired. This is Katy Perry. We played it the other day, but I'm going to play it again because it is inspiring. It's inspiring people to make parody videos of her, which we will also show because I can't help it. I saw it this morning and now you have to too. Katy Perry on the Divine Feminine, blah, 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 blah.
It is the highest high, and it is surrender to the unknown, trust, and this whole journey is not just about going to space. It's the training, it's the team, it's the whole thing. I couldn't recommend this experience more. This is like up there with all the, different tools that I've learned in my life, from meditation to the Hoffman process. This is up there because what you're doing is you're like really finding the love for yourself, because you got to trust in yourself on this journey. And then you're feeling the love when you come down, for sure. And you're feeling that strength. So I feel really connected to that strong divine feminine right now.
By the way, you're such a badass. I love that the month of April, you're like, I'm going to space and I'm launching my tour.
And I had never seen I'd never seen hardly any black people in Scranton at the time and I was only going in 4th grade. And I remember seeing the kids going by at the time called colored kids on a bus going by.
I just wanted to play Joe Biden. I wanted to play Joe Biden after Katy Perry because that's the speech. That's from a speech she gave the other day. They were like, "Hey, we're sort of irrelevant. We're kind of screwing up. We've got senators from Maryland who may have been conned into going down and lobbying on behalf of El Salvadorian gang members. We've got Donald Trump like running the table on us when it comes to getting court cases in his favor. Who can we lean on? Maybe we could get that old guy that says racist stuff to come out and give a speech like he's about to fall asleep because it's after 7:30 p.m. So they brought out the human Roomba. They brought him back, and he did not disappoint. He dropped a colored people reference and about how he didn't know about black people. So that's awesome. Thanks, Joe Biden. That's not the parody I wanted to actually share with you guys. The parody I wanted to share with you is that the inspiring nature of that ride, that carnival trip where they did a parabolic arc up and back down, apparently, again, there's questions. They're like, hey, people are like, hey, how come the capsule isn't singed? How come it didn't hit the atmosphere? Apparently they weren't going fast enough for that. So, okay. I'm not an expert. Like of all the things that I'm an expert on, I am not an astrophysicist. I'm not an astrologist. I am not whatever Katy Perry is, which seems like a psychedelic enjoyer, a psychedelic mushroom enjoyer. But this lady also got the humor in it. So she is inspiring people. She's inspiring parody. And I think this is exactly the same exact clip that we just saw. It's just in instead of being in the landscape mode, this is now in vertical. So enjoy this in portrait.
I'm just so excited to keep learning about STEM and astrology and astronomy and pastrami and STEM. I'm just so full of love. I went to space and I liked it. So full of love. Space gives me love. I love STEMs. I just hope people understand that we weren't just taking up space, but we were making space and inventing space and holding space. I'm just so full of love that now, because I've gone to space, women can go to space. And in another life, I'd be an astronaut. This is just going to change the space game for women who have never been to space.
These people, they're so serious. If you're just listening, what you missed is that she's like holding this little flower for no particular reason. Kind of like she brought like a tiny flower up with her in the capsule, was flying around with it. They do this for people who want to experience weightlessness. They put them in a military aircraft, they do a dive, and then they get to float around for 90 seconds and have functional weightlessness. I don't know, man. All of this, we just had a couple of serious shows. I didn't even give you a palate cleanser yesterday. I wanted to make sure I made up for that by us laughing about stupidity, and that's my offering to you. So that's just I'm trying to make it right. Okay, I'm just trying to say that. You know what's not making it right? Puerto Rico is in darkness. This is not funny per se, although it is like, I guess it's ironic is probably more accurate. Puerto Rico plunged into darkness as the island is experiencing a complete island-wide blackout. They are a U.S. protectorate. They get a chance to vote, but nobody cares what they vote for because their votes don't get counted. They were hit by a massive power outage on yesterday, leaving them completely dark. The entire island apparently lost power for the second time in 4 months. It's a great example of what happens when your priorities are completely messed up, when you have a ridiculously corrupt area. Puerto Rico is the location that there's an FBI office down there, for whatever it's worth. It's considered a hardship, and it's the recommended location that the Suspendables floated to Kash Patel as a place that you could offshore all the senior executives that are trash inside the bureau. It's like, look, there's unlimited crime. There's unlimited corruption. Every single year, they bring the hostage rescue team, the one that we saw Kash Patel hanging out with the selection for, the guys with the cool helicopters and the Black Hawks and, you know, the fast ropes and the Pano night vision. You can take them, and they do pretty regularly. There's a thing called Operation Guard Shack. They've done it multiple times now, where they go and arrest like a third of the Puerto Rican police. I've got buddies that are Puerto Rican, from Puerto Rico, grew up in Puerto Rico, several of them that are FBI agents. And when they go there, they're like, yeah, we don't even follow the laws of the city, of the cities that we're in. We just blast through. If it's after 9 p.m. and it's dark outside, you don't even stop at stop signs because you're going to get mugged. You're going to have somebody try to carjack you. You know, the thing that I found funny about this, because it's not funny to have people in a blackout. The funny thing is that the folks there basically continue to support the same regime that is allowing this stuff to happen. They're in favor of Democrats for some reason. They're in favor of things like the Jones Act, which makes anything that comes into Puerto Rico have to touch a U.S. mainland port first. It supports the unions, but the unions are not making anything better in Puerto Rico. Does that make any sense to you? Would you actually be like, okay, here's the deal. I'm so much in favor of Democrat policy that I'm going to back the Jones Act, which was this corrupt deal the United States passed so that all of the union dock workers will get the first touch of every overseas trading deal. If it comes in from China, if it comes in from Europe, if it comes in from Australia, there's actually manufacturing in Australia. If it comes in from Israel, who makes a lot of things as well, and they were to come in on a ship, they have to touch one of the U.S. ports where you have these dock workers. So it's got to hit like New Jersey. It's got to hit New York. It's got to hit Miami. It's got to hit Los Angeles or San Francisco. It has to come to mainland United States first. And then they can take it off this overseas flagship. They put it on a U.S. flagship. So now you have an unload and a reload that costs a lot of money. Then you're going to put it back on a ship that's U.S. flagged with a U.S. crew and send that to Puerto Rico or Hawaii. So two places that should have every single reason to not want the Jones Act, they back the Jones Act. And that's how you end up with this. I found this is an old headline. I mean, it's not current by any means, but it is kind of comical to me. We've got Puerto Ricans crying about something, and then at the same time, this is from PBS, residents of Puerto Rico, they can't vote, but they're still mad at Donald Trump, and they are helping shape the race because Puerto Ricans in the United States are voting against the interests of Puerto Rico. That's the claim. They're overwhelmingly in favor of Vice President Kamala Harris, who, thank God, did not win. So you see this kind of stuff, and you just go like, okay, yeah, got it. You're not logical. You're not making any sense. And all of that no sense, not like tracking what goes on in the real world. This like, that used to be the claim against Republicans. They're like, why don't they vote for more government? It's against their best interest. Why do people in Oklahoma? I remember hearing this going back to the early 2000s when I was in Oklahoma. And it was a very red state then. It's a very red state now. They're like kind of like God and self-reliance. And there's a small, urban area that kind of votes otherwise. But it's a pretty conservative state. It's a very small state, too. When I was there were like 3 million people in the entire state. So the city of Dallas, Texas, which was only a couple hours south, had more people in the city than the entire state of Oklahoma. And they always said, like, you're a poor state. You've got bad educational outcomes. And why do you vote against more government when the government would come in and give you things? And it's because it's a false give. It only gives you up until some point. And then at some point in time, you realize that like the government is the most inefficient and the least effective way of getting the thing that you hope you're going to get. It can't give you anything because the federal government doesn't have anything unless it takes it from everybody else, including you. And then it inefficiently launders your own money back to you. So Oklahomans instinctively understood, I think, that putting more blocks in between them and the thing they needed, they'd be much better off for like voting for higher taxes from their state government or their local governments. That's always been the argument. Why do you vote against your own interests? I don't see why these places, these outliers, vote for Democrats when in fact it's actually not in their best interest, and it never has been. We're going to get into this funny little moment of getting these people trapped in. If you leave them enough breadcrumbs, they will walk into the bear trap. And we've seen what I believe was probably a set trap because the DOJ had the evidence. The Trump administration knew that this guy. Now they may have actually had a happy accident. I've always argued that the release of COVID-19, the way that actually got rolled out on the world, it's just as likely that it was accidental release in China. And if you guys don't understand, the Chinese basically have very long run capabilities to plan. They think of things in terms of 50 and 100 year strategies. But if somebody were to offer something that was not supposed to happen for 10 years and suddenly it's like, well, by mishap or human accident, it just popped up. You just take advantage of it. You're like, okay, fine. Well, we have a strategy for that. It was supposed to be 10 years from now, but the opportunity has arisen. So execute plan 10 year right now. And my guess is that even though the Trump administration probably didn't mean to deport this guy, that's probably my guess, is that this Kilmar Abrigo Garcia dude that's down in El Salvador, he probably wasn't like an intentional trap. When they saw the move from the political left to go after and defend him, they were like, whatever, we have a target of opportunity. This target has presented itself. Let's bury these guys. And I'm going to show you kind of the walkthrough of how that looked. And it's been nothing but comedy on my end, only because I know enough about how that kind of stuff works. Let's do a sponsor before we get there. One of the things you should realize is that when things are good, that's the time when you build the ark. When you are feeling comfortable or safe and you feel like you're winning a little bit, that's when you should start kind of like making sure your fortifications are good. Puerto Rico would be wise to do that. One of the things you can do is you can check into a service that's going to make sure that you are not being defrauded. And the one that we use is patriot-protect.com/Kyle. So Patriot Protect and the website patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Data breaches are basically ubiquitous at this point. It doesn't matter if you're a federal employee or a private employee. It doesn't matter if you're applying for a job. If your name has been in a record-keeping system at some point in time, you are likely to have them exposed. It's not really an if, it's actually a when, as far as I can tell. These things just happen. Whenever there's data that gets hacked. And so things like your full name, your social security number, your home address, phone numbers, maybe you're not too worried about that. What about drug test results? These things can be used to con you, because when someone picks up the phone, they know more than they should about you. They're able to validate information. And if you want to protect yourself against these leaks, the best way to do it is to make sure that they are not available. Make yourself a more difficult target. You basically scrape this stuff away from the internet so that the people that are getting paid, a couple bucks an hour to sit and dial you up from Nairobi, or they're going to call you up from somewhere in India, trying to just fill the funnel full of possible scam victims, you want to make sure you're not in that scam victim tunnel. Okay. Patriot-protect.com/KYLE. You'll save 15% on an annual subscription. It's relatively inexpensive. And the numbers work out is that apparently the odds of you getting scammed over your lifetime comes down to about $600 a year. It costs less than $100. It costs less than $80, if my memory serves, per year to get a kind of an insurance policy against this stuff. They have protocols to go into the dark web. They have protocols to scrape from the data broker. So check them out. The link is in the show description. Again, it's patriot-protect.com, promo code KYLE. Let's do this story about how NBC is covering it, because let's kind of like play with this. Trump, we're going to ease our way into the immigrant story. Trump measures are making life more difficult for immigrants, not just the undocumented immigrants. And you're thinking, well, like, who else are they going to get rid of? Who's the Trump administration trying to make leave? Why are they trying to make life more difficult for legal immigrants who are actually here legally? Well, it's kind of misleading, because although they're here legally, they're usually people who have been paroled or they've been given a temporary protected status, which was just a unilateral opening from the Biden administration to just bring these folks in. Trump administration is waging a concerted pressure campaign against undocumented immigrants, as well as hundreds of thousands of people, we covered them the other day, who are legally here in temporary protected status. They're trying to revoke it. Now, interestingly enough, that should be their purview. The last administration said that they were allowed to come here. We didn't make any special deals. We didn't sign any treaties with these people. They uprooted their life because apparently their life was like not safe wherever they were. And now the Trump administration is looking at the same data and saying, well, it actually is safe. You can go back. You can go back to Haiti. You can go back to Venezuela. You can go back to Cuba. You can go back to Nicaragua. You can go back to any of the places. We don't need you here. You're not adding any value. We spent a lot of money on you. We don't want that. Which means that you have to have people on the political left cry about it. He's escalated his clampdown on immigrants beyond what was done in his first presidential term, which included separated children. They're still running these narratives, by the way. I wonder if they're going to do the good men and women on both sides bit. Apparently, he's guilty of separating children from their parents at the border, which we all know was part of the Flores decision after years and years of adjudicating this in the public sphere. This was an Obama-era issue as well. They're working towards building a border wall between Mexico and the United States. God forbid we have a freaking border. God forbid that. I mean, I guess they can't keep track of the fact that this was actually written up, that this was proposed, and that Americans voted on it. They actually wanted this. They're trying to curb illegal immigration by giving fewer visas and refugee admissions. Yeah, that's all within the purview. There's nothing wrong with any of this stuff. But it tells you kind of the background of the story. Again, that's NBC reporting. NBC is actually going to be the hero of the story at the end of the day. So just stand by. The best is we're going to walk through one sort of case example of how somebody got set up. And I think it was what happened to this senator we talked about yesterday, Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, who has been defending his constituent, I kid you not, Rachel Maddow, called him a constituent. So who is the guy? We're going to kind of play a little game here about how this story evolved. I oftentimes assume information that is in my head, and many of you may be tracking if you're really diligent. But if you're not someone who spends as much time as I do on social media, if you're not trolling news stories all day long, which is what I do, then I'm not going to assume facts that are not evidence. So here's the story. It starts over with, this is actually a syndicated story, I believe, from NBC, but it's being carried over on Yahoo News. So I pulled the headline from Yahoo News. This is regular stuff from April 8th, how a Chicago Bulls hat led to a Maryland dad being mistakenly shipped to an El Salvadorian prison. Now, when you read that, just the words, you'd be pissed. You're like, wait a minute, the guy was wearing a wrong hat and then he got deported? This is not okay. That's not what America's about. I've actually seen people who I tend to agree with almost all the time. And they said, where's the due process? What is going on here? Like, how are we allowing this man to be thrown out of our country? Let's get into that. The hat that you see on the screen is one of several hats that I've seen him in that are Chicago Bulls hats. Now, you're allowed to wear a Chicago Bulls hat in America. Maybe you're like me, and the last time you remember the Chicago Bulls like mattering, because I haven't cared about sports since I was a kid, like, Michael Jordan was one of the Chicago Bulls. Everybody was a Bulls fan when Jordan was there, and Rodman and Scottie Pippen, and those are like the only basketball players I can still name. I'm still like more of a Larry Bird fan. Versus, wasn't it Jordan versus Bird? Didn't they have that video game? I feel like I used to play, I used to shoot from the outside. So that was always my jam. I liked Larry Bird. Police believe that Kilmar Abrego Garcia was a member of MS13 for two reasons. Allegedly, this is the article. He was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie, and they had an unnamed informant tell them so. But these pieces of evidence were not enough to keep him in immigration custody in 2019 when the authorities arrested him. Nearly 6 years later, they appeared to be the basis for shipping him to a foreign mega prison. They set the trap that on accident, they may have sent him over there and part of that group. I'm sure he was on the list. He had a deportation order per Stephen Miller. He's a 29-year-old father of three. He's a protected legal resident who's lived in Maryland since 2011. He's originally from El Salvador. These are the words that they're saying. Now he's in a high security prison as of March 15th out in El Salvador. And the Trump administration did admit in some legal filings that it was an administrative error that put him on the specific flight that he was on. So that got people all wound up. And so now it's the Bulls hat, and that's how he got there. Okay. Then you read a little further and you find out, well, where was he engaged? The arrest in 2019 is based in part on a Chicago Bulls hat. On March 28th of 2019, Abrego Garcia and three other non-citizens were apprehended by local authorities while soliciting for work outside of a Home Depot in Hyattsville, Maryland. Remember Hyattsville, Maryland. We're going to come to that in just a second. Okay. The court document states that upon his arrest, the authorities with Prince George County, I've worked with PG County, accused Abrego Garcia of being affiliated with MS13. He repeatedly denied those affiliations with the notorious international crime group and didn't provide officers with information about any other gang members. They turned him over to ICE. All right. So now we're going to go to the map. And this is a map of, there's a line there on the, let's say, the closest side to me on the lower end of this little square. That is the Maryland, D.C. line. Okay. And you might not be able to see it, but it runs from left to right downward on your screen. And above it, you can actually see right in the smack dab center is the Home Depot. That's where the Home Depot is. It's up there on the highway. And I'm actually going to open a map bigger for myself here real quickly. Okay. It's up on the highway and it is 410. That's the highway that it's just off. It's just south of the 410. And the stuff around it, if you look off to the east and a little bit to the north, is Tacoma Park. And if you look due east, you'll see Manor Park and Chillum. If you look down a little bit to the the southeast, those are all to the west. So west is Tacoma Park, west is Chillum, southeast is Hyattsville. It's right there in there. It's near the PG Mall, the mall at Prince George. I've met in that parking lot with sources. All right. It's walking distance from the Home Depot. And then if you look just a little bit to the north, and I wonder if there's a scale. I don't think I captured the scale on this, but it's not very far. It's measured in like single digit miles, maybe 2-3 miles. There's this little place called Casa Inc. Multicultural Center. It's in the northwest end of this little space here. And it's in a place called Langley Park. And every time I drove on 410 and saw the exit for Langley Park, I mentally associated Langley Park with MS13 because that's where we did work. Okay? That's where we did the work. That's where all of the surveillance got done on MS guys. That's where all of the source monitoring did. We put them on body wires and we went out there and dealt with stuff there. Casa de Maryland is just like, it's an MS13 enclave. They basically run that whole area. And this is what it looks like zoomed up close. There's an arrow that's closest to me. It's pointing downward. That is what we call Casa de Maryland. It's Casa Multicultural Center in Langley Park. That is a complex of apartment buildings that is essentially a captured fiefdom for MS13. At least it was when I was working in that area. And then the second arrow, which is furthest away from me, it's a little bit further east, is on the other side of kind of a green belt. There's a little river and a trail system that runs through, and there's a bunch of woods there. Okay, the Home Depot that they're talking about is walking distance from both of these places. That second arrow shows you a parking lot where law enforcement has staged, at least a couple times with me, where they would go and deal with stuff. I'm not giving away any ops here. I'm just telling you it's an open parking lot. And in those woods, they have found bodies of people who have been killed by MS13, sometimes in advanced stages of decomposition. So when you look at this map, and again, I'll dance between the two of them. This is the zoomed out version of it. Casa de Maryland's going to be in the northwest corner of this map, those two little red little dots. And then just off from it, within... it's just it's 2-3 blocks away tops. And these are not like New York City blocks. This is less than, a quarter of a mile, easy walking distance. You see the places where we've found bodies in that brown swath of trees right there. All right. And there's trash dumps nearby and they find bodies in there. There's parks and they find bodies in there. And so what happens is MS runs these areas, these captured enclaves. They do not allow anybody to come in without their say-so or their knowledge. They run counter surveillance operations. They've got kids standing out there on the corners looking for everything. So now we're telling, and there's a uniform, okay? There's a uniform for what MS looks like. If you've never seen why these guys, you go, well, what does the Chicago Bulls have to do with it? For whatever reason, they have this devil sort of culture, and they use horns. And the horns on the Chicago Bulls is close enough. It's the closest commercially available logo, so they don't have to go get custom-made stuff, and they can blend in ostensibly. He's like, no, I'm just a Bulls fan. Okay, this is an MS guy who's got a picture of his MS13 tattoo across his back, and he's doing the horns. He's putting up the horns over his shoulder so he can show who he is. He's repping the gang symbol and their tat. Here's another one of them. And on the screen, I added this guy, Obrego Garcia, who's wearing the Bulls hat. Okay, there's another guy. He's unrelated to these. I just did an overlay. So these people are not his buddies or anything. This is just two pictures on top of each other. I'm being totally clear with you. The Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie in Maryland, in Hyattsville, Maryland, is a really specific thing. It's kind of like when I was a kid growing up, and if you were wearing like the Raiders gear at the mall, there were certain gangs that just knew like that was who you were repping a certain color. And this is one of them. So this is not just some like accidental, like, well, you just happen to be wearing a Bulls hat. Blah, 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 blah. Nonsense. Okay? Just so we're all aware of it. We're going to go into sort of the stupidity and the amusing stupidity of the congressman that we covered yesterday, the senator, actually. I got some clips from him landing and going around there and showing up on Rachel Maddow and crying for this guy. And then we're going to get to the punchline. The punchline is the Trump administration just let him walk right into the bear trap. They have absolutely they're not playing around with this stuff. And it's even worse because the FBI, what turns out, was probably complicit in what was going on there. They were at least making this guy available to do more crime. And that's not surprising. If there was a good plan behind it, no big deal. But Tennessee Star's got some pretty interesting information about that. All right. Before we get there, I'm showing you right now on the screen some footage from SHOT Show where I met the folks over at Silent. It's slnt.com/KYLE. You'll save 15% with our promo code. If you land there, it'll tell you that you got to the right place. Silent is a company that is helping you protect yourself from big government, from big tech, from corporate America, from criminals, people who are coming after your privacy, which could be compromised 24/7. You have to protect yourself with Faraday products if you want to be able to protect your ingoing and your outgoing signals from your devices. They are constantly pinging the outside world. If you have Bluetooth on, if you have your Wi-Fi on your phones, your tablets, your laptops, etc., even when you think the device is is turned off, it's still out there pinging these things. This has been proven over and over again for folks who work in CI, which is something I used to do. So you can get their phone sleeves, you can get them even in pants, but their backpacks are really easy to carry around. They have signal blocking technology. Right now, if you were to go and buy their everyday Faraday backpack, which you'll get 15% off, you'll save like $35 on it. They're actually throwing in an additional Faraday bag for free, which is cool. They're oftentimes adding, if you spend any money with them, they're going to add like an additional product on there. Check them out. See if there's something that suits your needs. I like the E3 Faraday backpack. I think that's really cool. I've got their dry roll top bag, which you can take in a kayak, and it'll keep all your stuff safe. It also tends to be TSA proof because the TSA guys don't know what to do with it. Folks, you can only protect your data if you know that you're actually leaking data, okay? And so you can go silent with slnt.com/KYLE. Again, it's 15% free shipping on qualified orders. You're staying ahead of what's coming at you. You're securing your privacy. It's also a nice break to have your phone not ring sometimes. If you toss it in, I actually throw it in before I do every one of our Sunday sit-downs so that my digital watch doesn't beep all day long. Again, slnt.com/KYLE. Check out a Faraday product from them. Cool company, really cool products. Really, like, I'm a gear guy, so like I'm biased. We're gonna get into what this senator got into. I wanted to show the chat. Thank you guys for being here. Again, we're seeing all of you folks up here joining from all the different places. If you do join us over on YouTube, if you join us over on X, that chat actually copies over to themselves. What we can't get is Rumble to play fair with the other ones. Rumble just kind of lives in a league of its own. So that's what you're seeing up on the screen here. But I do see that you guys are out there chatting away and sharing information and adding your own 2 cents to it. If you guys want the full experience of the Kyle Seraphin Show, that's how you do it. You go and actually join in with our live chat because these folks are constantly sharing their own experiences, which, you know, you guys have experiences that are not mine. It's useful. Okay, here's this clown. You ready? Senator Van Hollen, he flew to El Salvador as calls intensify for Kilmar Abrigo Garcia's return. Why are they intensifying? They're intensifying because the media got involved in this and they decided that they were going to push it. So I'm going to play kind of like where it started and then how it was going, and then we'll get to the Rachel Maddow, which is all fun, and then, like I said, we'll kind of finish with a big dunk on them because the Trump administration decided that they were going to just drop the documents. They've been like kind of slow playing it and letting these people say there was no evidence except the fact that he had a hat. It was just a hat and a hoodie, and that's why this senator has to go to the airport and do these stupid TikTok videos.
I'm here at the airport. I'm about to board my flight for San Salvador. The goal of this mission is to let the Trump administration, to let the government of El Salvador know that we are going to keep fighting to bring Abrigo Garcia home until he returns to his family. I hope to meet with representatives of the government. I hope to have the chance to actually see Kilmar and see what his condition is. But
yeah, and it sounds like he wasn't let into the prison, so that's really funny. So this was just like a complete theatrical trip. Again, he actually filmed himself in the car. He totally wasn't prepared for this as he brought along his little microphone and all that kind of nonsense, right? This is a publicity tour. Again, he did it yesterday. He stepped off on the same exact day, or the day before yesterday, rather, the same exact day when the killer of Rachel Morin was actually convicted. So he went to go visit someone that he considers a constituent, a quote unquote Maryland man who was just wearing this MS13 uniform hat and hoodie and totally had nothing to do with the gang, even though he was just hanging out in the area where the gang hangs out wearing the gang colors. So that's totally safe. And by the way, at 29 years old, we had guys whose nickname on the streets was abuelo, grandfather in Spanish, at 24 years old, because that gang is composed of like 13, 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. There are 17 and 18-year-olds that are like mid-level enforcers for MS-13 that have already killed people with machetes, and they're totally cowards the way they do this. They'll get one person out there, sometimes women, and they'll hack them to pieces with machetes, and everybody gets a hit in. So they're all part of this like gang chop fest, and then we find the mutilated bodies days, weeks, sometimes years later, you know, in various stages of decay. These are brutally disgusting people. And the other thing they like to do is they like to traffic in little girls. The tactic, if you guys don't understand how this works, when they talk about trafficking young women, what they'll do is they'll have some girl that's part of the gang. She's already been jumped in. She's liberated. She's an unaccompanied minor. She's 16, 17 years old. And she makes other girlfriends, lures them to parties where the MS guys are at. And then they're like, hey, like, you're pretty cool. You're a cool chick. You want to hang out with the gang? Like, we'll protect you. Your parents suck. Like, we're cooler. And she's like, yeah, I want cool people to hang out with me. Like, I'm mad at my parents. I'm 16. So they do. And then they keep her. And she's like, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to leave. And they're like, that's not what's going to happen. Now you're going to stay here. And that girl ends up getting brutally raped on a mattress in the woods somewhere, getting paid by a bunch of construction workers from the same place that her and her family fled. Like, we're getting, 22-year-old construction workers raping 16-year-old girls on the ground. for months until we finally find them and then start building cases on them. So when they talk about human trafficking, there's two ways it could be done. It can be labor trafficking, where they're smuggling people in, and then there's sex trafficking, which these guys do as well. And almost all the guys that we arrested that were involved in the sex trafficking, that were involved in the management of these operations, they didn't have a criminal record. So everything you're hearing about these guys crying about how, oh, he didn't have a criminal record. Yeah. That means that they were actually doing a decent job of like hiding their activities. We have arrested people, the FBI did, in the DC area, and it's one little squad that works it, and they're massively overworked. They're the only people doing criminal work on this stuff. We have arrested people that not only didn't have a criminal record in the United States, they had never actually been seen by any law enforcement organization ever. I need you to process that just because someone doesn't have a record doesn't mean they're not doing crime. It means they've never been convicted of a crime, and that's not the same thing. We had guys that we had never actually laid eyes on. For months, we were watching them, and we're a sophisticated organization that was doing this. My team did this full time, and we never once saw them come in or out of the places that they were supposed to be until we finally went out with a U.S. Marshals technology and the FBI sort of like technical surveillance capabilities, which is called WID, and we were actually identifying their wireless intercept. And we were like, aha, that's the cell phone associated with this asshole who's doing the things, pardon my language, who's out there trafficking girls. We're going to follow that cell phone, watch what car it gets in, follow that car. When someone gets out of that car, we're going to identify which way the signal goes. And when we see that, we're going to grab that guy because that's the person we have the arrest warrant for. And they switch up their phones all the time. So tying people to a gang oftentimes involves: who are their associates? What is their pattern of life? Are they dropping phones regularly? Are they switching jobs up? Are they making money without having any obvious signs of being able to make money because they're doing it through extortion? Do they live in a certain area? Do they interact with these people? Do they come from a specific place? Do they have tattoos that identify them? There's a lot of things that go into identifying somebody as a gang member and being pretty conclusive. Gang intelligence units are very sophisticated at this point. Here's a senator getting conned and not realizing that as he's driving around in El Salvador, talking about how they're leaving the airport.
I just landed at the airport in San Salvador a little while ago. I'm now en route into the city, looking forward to meeting with the team from the American Embassy. And I do want to thank our Foreign Service officers and the whole team at this embassy and embassies around the world for all the good work they do on behalf of our country. I'm proud to co-chair the bipartisan Foreign Service Caucus.
Blah, 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 blah. His mom was in the CIA. His dad was a Foreign Service officer. So, of course, he's going to thank the people that he grew up around. This is not surprising stuff. What is kind of surprising is how easily these people were taken in by it. So here is Rachel Maddow bringing him on to talk about something. And she is just absolutely flabbergasted. She's flabbergasted, and she's so upset that this man, who's alleged to have been involved in human trafficking, in sex trafficking, in dealing in the nastiness of this transnational organized criminal organization, the same person, the same gang that Aaron Stevenson was blowing the whistle on and lost his job when he went to Project Veritas, when he was with USCIS. That same group, this is who they're running cover for. Like, you can't make up this type of publicity. Again, I'm going to show you the dunk in the end, because the Trump administration just was letting them do their thing.
I just want to underscore what you just said there, that you were told by the U.S. Embassy in El Salvador that they have received no request from the White House or from the Justice Department, from any other entity in Washington, asking them to take any steps to obtain the release of Mr. Abrego Garcia. Presumably, it's the local U.S. officials at the embassy there who would be the relevant point of contact, first point of contact for the U.S. government trying to attain that outcome, correct?
Well, that's exactly right. And it is pretty clear that the Trump administration has not lifted a finger to implement that court order. And so I think it's important that the courts know that, and they will know that. And again, denying his family an opportunity to even have a phone call with Kilmar is just a gross violation of basic human rights and human decency. And, I asked the vice president if I came back next week, whether or not I could go visit Kilmar. And the answer was no, he couldn't guarantee that. I said, look, I may be the first member of Congress here, the first senator, but I can assure you more will be coming. And you cannot continue to keep this man locked up in this worst prison in El Salvador, and one of the worst in the hemisphere, when he hasn't committed a crime.
That's not actually true, because as a senator for the United States, you actually have no ability to compel the government of El Salvador to do anything. That's just not what you do, buddy. So we're going to go with what the DOJ dropped in just a second here. Just remind you guys, I'm seeing, like, looks like there's like 200 people watching over on YouTube, which is awesome. Like, you guys, that's not a ton of people for a big channel, but we've never had anybody been able to get over. We've never been promoted anywhere on YouTube. So it's kind of fun to see it. So thanks for watching over on YouTube. Thanks for watching over on Rumble. Our normal crew is there every morning. You guys, this is how you find it. If you want to share the show with somebody and you don't, by the way, YouTube is the only place where you can find the show in 4K, which is kind of cool. I do stream it in 4K over there just for you guys. If you guys want to share it, it's KyleSeraphinShow.com. You can send the Spotify. That's only in 1080p, so it's good for your phone, et cetera, et cetera. You ready for the dunk? You ready for the fun? Because this is where it got really fun for me. Here it is. Kaboom. 2 different fantastic stories. One of them, the bottom one, is from NBC. I told you, they started it off. That was where the first story goes, and they're also the hero of this story too. New documents detail the government's case that of a mistakenly deported man was in fact a gang member. The documents released after weeks of pressure. Again, maybe just a big bear trap that the Trump administration had to prove the connection that Kilmore Abrego Garcia was in fact a member of MS13. They dropped these documents. They included things like, I don't know, how he was potentially beating his wife for years. And so the woman that's out there is the bad way. Like, this is where people get real weird about this. If you've ever dealt with domestic violence calls, I wasn't a cop, right? But I know a lot of cops, and I've seen this done. I was also in the EMS field, so I was the person that came in after the cops had to come in when there was a beating sometimes. And what you would find is that women who are beat by men, they may not want to get their faces tuned up, but they oftentimes will defend their abuser on a regular basis. Any of you guys who know this is just the saddest part of the story, because they don't know how else they're going to support themselves. So that man actually represents their meal ticket. For better or for worse, survival instincts are higher, even if somebody is tuning you up on a semi-regular basis a couple times a year and giving you a black eye. You still might stay with that guy if you don't have any other plan out. That's just the sad reality of it. So this woman, supposedly, starting back in like 2019, 2020, 2021, there's documentation, there's police reports, which I have read, saying that this guy was tuning her up. So he's not a good guy. You've got now a United States senator flying internationally to go try to get access to a dude who's an alleged gang member that the Trump administration called. They said, well, we don't trust you, and we don't trust the government of El Salvador, and we need to get him out, and we need to send our senator so we could talk to our constituent. Meanwhile, he's ignoring the family of 5 kids and a husband who lost their mother and wife, right, respectively, who was murdered by a guy from El Salvador in a very similar kind of, like, a real similar kind of dude. So here it goes. Justice Department records, which were not previously made public, detailed how police officers in Maryland assess Abrego Garcia was a member of MS13. This would be probably PG County. And they're not strangers to this. This is daily occurrences. As I showed you on the map, that's how it works. There are places where there are just MS dudes that live. And it turns out Hyattsville, Maryland is a huge hub for that. He was arrested in a 2019 arrest. He had no criminal history at the time. The document also states the attorneys have denied he's a gang member. They're not going to say that he's a gang member. In a document titled Gang Field Interview Sheet, PG County detailed in March 2019 that he was approached with 3 other people loitering in the parking lot. That's the same story that we started with, right? He was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie. He had rolls of money, with rolls of money covering the eyes and the ears and the mouths of the presidents. The officer said such insignias indicating see no evil, hear no evil, say no evil are indicative of Hispanic gang culture. The officers then consulted with a reliable, confidential human source. Again, they tried to blow this part off, but CHS is how you understand what's going on in a gang, who advised that Abrego Garcia was the rank of Checo with the moniker Chele, Chele. Forgive me if I mispronounce it. I don't really care about gang street names that much. He was handed over to immigration authorities, wound his way through the legal process. In 2019, an immigration judge barred him being sent to El Salvador. The order said that he proved he had a well-founded fear of future persecution in El Salvador from other gangs. The reason he couldn't be deported because of his fear for his life was that other gang members would come after him. And we have softies and lefties working in the administrative judges there. These immigration judges oftentimes are looking into things that we're not responsible for. Look, you have no right to be in this country. Get the hell out. I'm sorry that you're a gang member and you've pissed off other gangs in places where you came from. That doesn't mean you get to operate with impunity here. That's the crazy thing. He was stopped again in 2025 in an IKEA parking lot, deported to El Salvador a couple days later. The rest is history. The funny thing is that's not where the story ends for this guy. If you look at the top headline, and this is something that was just released by the Tennessee Star, who punches way above their weight for their reporting. Biden's FBI ordered the Tennessee Highway Patrol to release the quote-unquote Maryland man, that's what we're calling the guy, right? Recently deported to El Salvador after he was detained at a 2022 traffic stop on suspicion of human trafficking. The Star learned Wednesday that he was an alleged member of the Central American gang MS13. He was deported under Trump's legal authorities, or amid legal claims that he wasn't allowed to be reported, that it was a mistake, but he was also suspected to have been engaging in human trafficking by the Tennessee Highway Patrol. So how did they figure that out? They learned from sources familiar with the incident. Abrigo Garcia was stopped for an unknown reason on December 6th of 2022. This is very specific. The Tennessee Highway Patrol, the officer responsible for the stop, immediately discovered that he was transporting 7 passengers with 8 total individuals inside the car. So he's one, he's got 7 other guys. If you don't know how human trafficking works, if you don't know how human smuggling works, I saw this when I was down near the border in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Having dealt with assaults on federal officers and the Border Patrol guys, having a Border Patrol officer living directly across the street from me, I actually broke his mailbox when we lived there. He was a really good guy. I lived in the house of a former Border Patrol officer, like a former guy who worked at Undertac. The way that they deal with this stuff is that there are certain numbers of people that you can put into a vehicle that will not get you prosecuted by the United States Attorney's Office. And that number is always changing. Some days you could be transporting 4, and if you don't have more than 5, they won't prosecute you. They'll just let you go. Sometimes if you have more than 7, let's say, then, if you have 6, they escape it. These guys are constantly getting intel on who's getting jammed up and who's getting let go. In this case, he had 8 people in the vehicle. There were 7 of them that were being transported by this guy. And that might have been under the number that the United States Attorney's Office in Tennessee was willing to prosecute. Okay, this is prosecutorial discretion. The gang game of moving these people around is a high stakes game with a lot of money involved. And when they lose a load, they basically adjust fire. So maybe they ran with 10 guys. And if they get caught, then they run with 8 and they get let go. And they're like, cool, 8 is the number. We're going to run 8. We'll run 8 in the car, and that means they're going to let us go. They're not going to go ahead and take us in. Now, they might deport those 8 guys, but they don't care about that. They want the trafficker to be able to continue running loads. So sometimes they're just testing, they are pressure testing the U.S. immigration enforcement system. And in this case, they were told by the FBI to let him go, which usually means a declination, lest you be concerned. There was a 2-hour traffic stop. They determined that he was operating a vehicle without a license. They began searching for information about him. They ultimately discovered that he was on a terrorist watch list. Now, when you say terrorist watch list to the Tennessee Highway Patrol, it's very likely that they have a very different definition. It's on an FBI watch list, but whether it's terrorist, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's gang related, it could be something else. They may not even know the name because they don't say what specific database he was in. But he was flagged by the FBI. They couldn't locate him, but he was on a deportation list. All right. They called the FBI, which was they say he was led by Chris Wray at the time. Yeah, whatever, fine. It was under the Biden administration's policies. The FBI instructed. The real key here is who runs whether or not the FBI is going to pick up these cases. And that actually comes out of the United States Attorney's Office for the state or the area. And in this case, that was Biden administration United States attorneys, who are all politically appointed, and DOJ Maine and the field offices that were running all these United States Attorney's Office were all on the same page that they were not targeting this stuff. So this is fun because somebody leaked this out to the Tennessee Star and shared this information. Again, overwhelming evidence that this guy was, in fact, the thing that they claim, and that the Trump administration was not wrong. They just let these people walk into the bear trap. It's fun to see it when they do it because they just said, well, here's an opportunity for these people to embarrass themselves. Will they even be embarrassed? Probably not. The Star learned that the circumstances of the stop that made responsible concerned that he was engaged in human trafficking. Again, when you see people with a bunch of folks sitting in the back and they don't have any sort of like interstate licensing for doing human transportation, you actually have to usually have a taxi license of some kind if you want to do a high occupancy vehicle. It's a misdemeanor in the state of Tennessee to operate a motor vehicle without a license. So they pulled him over, found that stuff out. Anyway, there's computer-aided dispatch. There's all kinds of other stuff. The FBI, of course, is not going to answer any questions about it or whether they were responsible. We've got some problems going on with the FBI at the moment. But it is fun to see that this all kind of came out. And why would the FBI not give information now? It turns out there was a guy that we used to listen to. He's not talking about it anymore. He's saying something different. But there was a guy that used to say things about how you couldn't trust the FBI. because they would let people like this go. And I don't think that was necessarily the fault of the agents, but the organization, the entire structure, the apparatus, which is run out of DC, that tells you what the priorities are. You know, we used to hear about this a lot, didn't we? That we couldn't trust them to do the right thing, that they weren't actually looking out for everybody, that maybe they were letting these people go. And I know that we were letting people who were involved in extortion go longer so they could build a big enough case to actually take the guy down. But it was almost always low-level guys. It was the low-level enforcers. We never went and got guys like this. Rarely. Because they're hard to get. Because they're run around. Because they're smarter. Because they're listed as Maryland dads. And they're not like hanging out with the gang guys all the time. Anyway, somebody used to remind us about that.
Folks, the FBI is lost. It's broken. Irredeemably corrupt at this point. The inexcusable raid on President Trump's home was the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean it when I say it. It's way past time to clean this FBI house up. They have burned every last shred of faith and trust freedom-loving Americans had in it. And to the libs out there, listen, don't even waste your time lecturing me on this issue. Not a second. I gaff you right off. I pay no attention to you losers, okay? No one's been a stauncher defender of FBI agents I work with than me. Go back and listen to my shows, you dipwads. I was the one defending them all the time.
Luckily, he's the one who's defending them today, too. So I guess you got that going for you. Consistency, points for consistency. Well done, indeed. The government almost always turns around and defends itself. That's what I found out. That's what I found out by bringing information to Congress. It turns out the biggest problem is not that there's a problem in the government. It's that you exposed the problem. You're the issue. If you guys saw what went kind of semi-viral yesterday on social media, I shared, again, this audio call I had with Marilyn Melky, who was a supervisory special agent that investigated me and actually had me removed from the Bureau. By the way, she's on an advisory board for a group called Reform the Bureau. You cannot make this stuff up. Who were invited to testify in front of Congress when I never have been. So you've got people that are part of the apologist culture inside the FBI that are now actually testifying on how you can, quote unquote, fix the FBI, even though they told us there was nothing wrong when they were getting rid of us. I'll give you another quick example because it's tax season, because I just had to write a check like many of you did. I don't feel great about writing a 5-figure check off to the federal government. It actually feels worse than ever that we're funding this crap. This is a great little story that Fox News had on there. As usual, there are government employees that have a very different standard for themselves than they do for the people that are outside of government, which is to say that if you skipped out on your taxes, you're going to jail like Wesley Snipes. But if you work for the IRS and you're one of the 5,000 people that owe over $50 million, you're probably not even going to get fired from the agency that collects taxes. 150,000 federal workers have not filed taxes and owe back taxes to the tune of $1.5 billion. Fox News covering the story. Don't take my word for it.
On Capitol Hill, Hillary.
Hi, Harris. Well, most Americans did have to write a big fat check to the government today to pay their taxes, but over 100,000 federal workers are not paying their taxes on time. In 2021, the IRS found that almost 150,000 federal workers owe about $1.5 billion in unpaid taxes. Over 5,000 of them work at the IRS and owe $50 million in overdue taxes. Senator Joni Ernst introducing several bills aimed at cleaning up the IRS. One bill would require IRS employees to be audited every year and fired if they don't pay their taxes. Another bill would sell off the IRS's weapons stockpile. It has spent about $10 million taxpayer dollars buying guns and ammo, stockpiling 4,500 guns, 5 million rounds of ammo, even 15 machine guns. Ernst says it's time to sell that stockpile off to pay down the debt, helping DOJ's mission. So far, DOJ has saved taxpayers $155 billion and counting.
All right, and I just want to do a little thing. Having 5 million rounds of ammunition is not even that big a deal. That's a classic sort of like Fox News. They're just as bad as any of the other people. This was a quick local story coming out of New Jersey. A Florida man was, it's always Florida man, isn't it? And by the way, he looks just like Florida man. Just close your eyes. Picture Florida man real quick. Yeah, he's in his 30s. He has dreadlocks. They're blonde and also some other color that looks like relatively natural and dirty. And he apparently had a quote unquote small arsenal on an Amtrak train. Listen, Florida man, you cannot go to New Jersey. That is not America. In fact, all Americans, you cannot go to New Jersey, New York. You cannot go north of Washington, D.C. in this country. That is no longer America. You will find yourself being accused of having a small arsenal just because you have a concealed carry weapon on you. But I had to just cover the story because I thought it was kind of fun. They are demonizing guns. We'll talk more about the thing that Tulsi Gabbard dropped maybe tomorrow with Steve Friend. He apparently boarded a train in New Jersey carrying ammunition, a couple of handguns, and an AR. That sounds like not that big a deal. That sounds like something that I have actually transported very, very clearly when I was a federal agent out of New York City. But he's from Fort Lauderdale. He didn't know it was wrong. And so they went after him. They hit him for aggravated assault, possession of a weapon, some other things. He also wasn't like making a great decision. But he had a small arsenal of deadly weapons. It was like 2 boxes of ammo, like 2 handguns and a rifle, from what I can tell. They're not real clear on that. They sent a canine team that was an explosive dog to come find him. So again, Fox News, they're scared of 5 million rounds. I turned out like that's like barely enough for these guys to do basic training. And there are IRS agents who don't suck, but there's not a lot of them. And also, I hate paying taxes to them too. So, all right, should we do a palate cleanse to kind of shut this thing down? I think we should. Again, I'll remind you guys, you can find the program at kyleseraphin.com if you want to go to our local channel and you want to support us locally. If you want to support us over on Rumble, we appreciate that. It's rumble.com/kyleseraphin. If you're watching right now and you haven't hit a thumbs up on there and give us the like, do that. The YouTube people are well above by percentage the liking that goes on. So thanks to the folks over on YouTube, and we had a record number over there. I saw we were clearing like closer to 250. That's not just a record, that is like double the number I've ever seen over on YouTube. So thanks for sharing us. For those of you that watch on YouTube, you're awesome, and I am going to respond to your comments like I have been. Again, lastly, Spotify, the best place if you're looking for a place after the fact and you don't like pop-ups. KyleSeraphinShow.com. It's just a little cheat code. It'll take you right to the Spotify app. Very, very cool. Let's do a palate cleanse. Something funny. I don't know. We've been talking kind of bad about how things are working in law enforcement. Not all cops suck. Some cops have a sense of humor. A lot of them have a sense of humor. That's why it's fun to work in that organization. It's usually like the worst of things that you see, and then like the most regular human instincts, laughing about the job, not wanting to do things that suck. Nobody wants to do paperwork, right? This guy did a comedy set. I've never actually seen a stand-up comic who used to be a military cop. So I found this fun. Again, it's just a little reminder that they're still... It's true, though, right? How did he get that far? The fact of the matter is, cops sometimes know things that are not documented because you can go through a logical course of action. And that actually ties directly back into saying somebody's a gang member. Just because it wasn't written down in the file that they understood something doesn't mean that it wasn't true. Anyway, well done, Trump administration, with the bear trap on this idiot senator. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you guys. Look forward to seeing you over on AMRAD, the American Radical Podcast, which we'll send into. And Steve Friend is going to be joining me tomorrow for a Friendly Friday, as usual. Jump in for that. It'll be a lot of fun. We start at 9:30 Eastern Time, 8:30 here in Texas, America. God bless you. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.